Welcome everyone to this evening's webinar on crypto assets. This is a webinar run by SCL Student Bytes. SCL Student Bytes is part of the Society of Computer and Law. The SCL is a registered educational charity, membership of which is free for students in either your undergraduate degree and trainees. And SCL Student Bytes is the student platform which hosts events but also publishes content. We're joined this evening by Leigh Sagar. So Leigh is a barrister at New Square Chambers, focusing on wills and estate planning, and he's also got a fairly sort of, I guess, a sizable bit of work focusing on sort of crypto assets and their sort of regulation of property. Again, within the sort of wills and estate planning space. But I'll hand over to Leigh to introduce himself properly.
Hi. I'm as Chris said, I'm a private client lawyer, so I'm looking at these things from the standpoint of somebody who's making a will, or who's administering in his estate, or fighting over the validity of a will or a trust, and also the taxes that are involved in that kind of thing.
Great. So maybe you could start, Leigh, by sort of just telling everyone sort of maybe a brief overview about sort of how you became a barrister, and then also sort of how your work has evolved to include crypto assets.
So I'm not sure people want to know how I became a barrister. I studied and did the course, but how I got involved in crypto is quite interesting, because as somebody who's thinking about wills and death and probate, I started to think about, what happens to stuff on somebody's computer when they die or they lose their capacity. And that led me into, looking at what other people are thinking about this. And at the time, which was about 6 years ago, there wasn't much thought about it. And so I was, trying to find out from first principles. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and I used to go to meetups to speak to people about what it was, because it was just something so completely foreign to me that it took me a while to get to understand it. And, once you go, what they call it, kind of going over the hump and going down the rabbit hole, it became fascinating, and I led from there. And, I tried to work out what the law was as it applies to crypto assets, and I'm still doing that, as are many other people now. It's a developing area.
Great. So on that note, and I'm sure many people in the audience would have heard, especially sort of in the last year, the rise of sort of NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, so these sort of digital assets. Do you maybe could share a bit more on sort of your thoughts on them, sort of, I guess, both in terms of their status of property, but also on, I guess, just their maybe their viability as something that people should look to acquire?
Yeah. I think that NFTs are going to be one of the most important things in people's lives in the future. NFTs, when used in conjunction with other tools that are being developed in blockchains, like stable coins and decentralized autonomous organizations and DeFi protocols, life is going to be revolving about those kind of things. Now, specifically on non-fungible tokens, if I have one Bitcoin and I have another Bitcoin, although you can't see them, but notionally they're there. They are pretty interchangeable. So one Bitcoin, although you can see how it got to where it is, how it was created and how it is now owned, you can see the path to it, but they're interchangeable. You can use one instead of the other, and it doesn't matter which one you use, with certain exceptions. But with a non-fungible token, that's a token that is actually unique and can be segregated from all other non-fungible tokens. And at the moment, they are being used mainly with art. The the important thing to think about the non-fungible token is that it's just like a ticket. You have the ticket, but everything else is outside the token. So at the moment, you have a piece of art, a digital art, which is on a computer somewhere, some hard drive or somewhere. And that is linked to the ticket, to the non-fungible token. And so you buy the non-fungible token and it becomes a proof of ownership of some rights. It doesn't mean that you own the digital artwork. What it usually means is that you have some license. And so between the non-fungible token and the piece of art, which is owned, the copyright of the art is owned by usually the creator, you have a contract between you and the creator, which gives you the rights in that art. And so that's one of the things actually that's interesting. You know, that's a lot of work for lawyers, for intellectual property lawyers at the moment. But non-fungible tokens aren't going to stop just with art. Imagine all the things that are being used today that are unique. For example, look at banknotes. Each banknote has a number, and you could have theoretically billions of non-fungible tokens running on a blockchain, and each one would be worth £1. I don't think that the British government is going to make its digital currency using non-fungible tokens, but it's a way. What about identification? Each person in the world could be linked to a non-fungible token, and that non-fungible token could in turn be linked to identification information. All kinds of things. You know, people in the insurance business are starting to use non-fungible tokens to identify the clients and the risks and the contracts that they are being entered into using, using digital tools.
Do you think you find it difficult to sort of translate? So as well as an estate law, sort of it's fairly old, right? There's a very long sort of case history, and to what extent do you think non-fungible tokens sort of disrupt the traditional, I guess, estate planning process, where property sort of passes down through? Given that you said they're not actually, it's not property in the sense it's sort of a license to access, right? An exclusive license to access or sort of utilize.
Well, I don't look at it like that. The non-fungible token is just a ticket. It's nothing else. The license is a contract outside the blockchain in the real world between the person who owns the non-fungible token and the owner of the copyright for the art world. And so if you're an estate planner and you know how to plan an estate, then if you understand what the non-fungible token means, then you could say, well, you have certain rights under this contract between you and the creator and the owner of the copyright, and you can leave those rights under your will. And so it becomes a fairly simple thing once you understand the basics, or not the basics, understand how the non-fungible token and how the contract relating to that non-fungible token works.
So taking a step back and sort of focusing on wider just crypto assets in general, do you think sort of the UK's sort of in relation to property ownership of crypto assets, do you think there's sort of the law is clear enough, or do you think there's some work maybe the government could do to sort of make Parliament and the government could do to make sort of position of on ownership a lot clearer?
So the position with ownership of crypto assets, first of all, there was some doubt whether crypto assets were property at some point. And then the UK Jurisdiction Task Force came out with its legal statement, and they explained what property was. And they said, well, in their view, crypto assets could be property. Since then, there have been a couple of decisions of the High Court which were in relation to injunctions. So the tests for those decisions where only one side really was being represented. That was on an arguable case basis, but the judges there were satisfied that it was property. The interesting questions that are still to be decided is what is the nature of that property? And the Law Commission has come up with 2 consultations in the last, well, both of them have just closed. So 2 or 3 months ago they started. And one of them was about, how do you deal with digital assets? And the other one is about paper relating to electronic assets. And so these things are going to be dealt with, but a lot of it is going to be possible to decide, and the courts will have to decide based on existing legal principles, mainly the common law. Whatever the Law Commission recommends, and it probably will recommend something. I'm not sure it's going to be earth-shattering, but it may take a long time in the current political circumstances. It may take a long time for legislation on ownership of crypto assets to be passed. But I'm confident that judges will be able to deal with these things. The only question is whether they will be able to take their thinking out of the real world and into a digital world, because it's counterintuitive. Everything in the digital world is a little bit counterintuitive when it becomes to law, because a Bitcoin doesn't actually exist. It only exists notionally because there's software that's connected to a blockchain, which is also software and running on a computer. And that software shows you on your screen that you have 1.35 Bitcoin. But apart from that computer program that's displaying your ownership of Bitcoin, all there are signals in the computer that make up a kind of notional ledger which shows transactions that have been undertaken that lead to your ownership.
And obviously, ultimately, just an electronic charge somewhere on a bit of metal somewhere. Before we sort of move on to the next question, Leigh, I sort of just say we've got a Q&A function in the bottom of the chat window at the bottom of the sort of below all the speakers. So if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask, feel free to sort of use the Q&A tool and or the chat to sort of ask away. So I guess on that note, you sort of spoke about the digital world being counterintuitive. Do you find that sort of there's a lot of technical you're having to develop a lot of technical expertise on how crypto assets work, from I guess a software technical perspective, in order to provide effective advice?
My view is that the more you can understand the technology, the better, because you need to understand what's going on so that you can apply the relevant law. But that's not necessary, and most lawyers won't understand much about the technology. What they need to do, I think, is to be able to ask the right questions. So they need to have sufficient understanding of what's going on. And it doesn't need to be how a smart contract works. It doesn't need to be how a blockchain operates and how the output of a transaction is transferred to the input of another transaction. You need to know that inside the blockchain, things are passed. There's a private key, there's a public address, and things like that. And you need to be able to ask an expert relevant questions relating to your case. And that's important. But the more you understand, I think the better.
Right, and sort of, I guess sort of maybe another sort of pre-arranged question, then we'll move on to some of the ones coming in via Q&A. In terms of the nature of your work, do you sort of find it's mainly sort of what trends are you seeing? Especially, I guess COVID as well might have sort of accelerated some people's ownership of
Yeah.
crypto assets. I think there was really a movement last summer where people sort of there was a big sort of push by the community to sort of drive adoption. But yeah, so I guess over the last, you mentioned sort of
Yeah.
6 years ago, but maybe we focus on the last 2 years. What trends have you seen? Sort of what do you think the future looks like in
So
terms of the law?
so until about a year ago, there weren't any cases on Bitcoin. I think there were. I had one, but the the nature of crypto assets, it was created by people for people who didn't like the involvement of lawyers and banks and governments and accountants in their business. And so the whole thing was that they kept it private, and you could keep it by and large private. I mean, there are companies now, and the law enforcement agencies have developed tools to find out who owns cryptos, much more than they used to. Uh, but mostly people like to have some privacy with their crypto. But there has become an understanding that the law does affect what people do with their crypto and how they use it. And so more and more people are starting to come to lawyers and make inquiries. Uh, I've got some crypto. Can I make a will? What do I do if I don't make a will? How do I, how should I pass my crypto on to the next generation? Things like that. And that's good, except that a lot of the lawyers think they can deal with this without any understanding, and I think that that's dangerous. But we can talk about that later if you want. But there are more people coming forward, to lawyers with inquiries because they need to know. The other thing that's happening is that the tax authorities are becoming much more aggressive now, and they're making it clear that you do have to pay tax, even if you exchange Bitcoin for Ether. It's not a question of only when you cash out at the end, but each transaction is taxed, and and people are becoming aware of that. And the tax man makes people nervous generally, and so they are starting to take advice on that. And that's a lot of the work that I have done is tax related.
Yeah, great. I guess so. I think we've got a question perhaps relevant to that. So there's it's probably more relevant to sort of financial regulation, but sort of do you think sort of I guess the question is from Dan. He's asking sort of about the looming SEC and sort of regulation. But I guess do you think more regulation of crypto assets will hinder adoption? Yeah, that's just a broad question.
So there are two aspects to regulation. I mean, I don't do a lot of financial services regulation. I don't do any, actually. I know something about it, and that's one thing. So there was a lot of activity a few years ago of people creating tokens and companies and businesses that use tokens that were that needed to be regulated, and they weren't, and now that's died off because there was a lot of trouble. The main thing I think that's going to affect crypto is the money laundering aspects of regulation, because the tax authorities want to know who's got crypto and who's spending it and who's transferring it and making profits or losses. And the way they do that is they make sure that they know who is buying into crypto, and the way they do that is to get information from every business that deals in crypto assets. And so at the moment, you have to have a license in the UK if you have a business like that, like an exchange or any business that's dealing in crypto assets. And that, it looks like that's going to become much more serious, and they may be trying to make sure that if somebody in, say, an exchange uh, makes a transfer that's initiated by the client, makes a transfer to a privately held wallet, which is only the business of the client, that they need to know who the client is, who owns the wallet that's being sent to. And that's one of the things that is a big deal in the United States this week, where there is a new bill going through the Senate or going through the Congress, where they're trying to raise a lot of money. And one of the ways they're raising a lot of money is to make sure they find out exactly who owns crypto and how are they using it. And the information from these people, like exchanges, is so important for that.
So did you think you could see more people sort of, I guess, sort of a move more to sort of not necessarily, I guess, the dark web exchanges or exchanges which sort of live off, or exchanges that are trying to avoid being noticed by a regulator? Do you think you could sort of see the rise of like a parallel system?
Well, there already is a kind of parallel system. There are crypto assets that are hidden. So that in some of them, that a transaction's happened, but you don't know, and there's no way to find out uh, who made the transaction, who received the transfer. And there's things like, the tokens like Monero and Zcash and things like that. And there are probably also other ways that on the dark web where people are doing things that are hidden. But I'm not sure how much of that actually goes on. I mean, it does go on, and there is a lot of money laundering and terrorist finances that use crypto, but I think it's overblown. I think there's a business that deals in these things, and they came out with the statistics that it was fairly low, and I don't know how they substantiated that. But it does go on, and it's like everything. Crypto is a lot like cash. You can hide it or you can have it in the open. If you really want to hide it, you can hide it, and people have all crazy ways of doing it. They have ways where they put it into a pool and you don't know where it's come out. I mean, but you should know that if you're using that kind of tool, the government is going to be much more suspicious when they find out that you have been using it. And I'm of the view, and it may not be the most popular one among people who own crypto, is that there's no harm in the government knowing that you have crypto and that you're using it. If you have money, your bank knows you have money and you use it, and they have duties to tell the government, and you have a duty to tell the taxman what you earn, the profits you make, and the gains. And I don't think that people should use crypto to hide these things. It's just they should use it as a monetary financial tool to get on with their honest work and honest labor.
Sure. I guess sort of on the topic of work, then sort of obviously you're a barrister, and I'm sure there's also sort of solicitors involved in the sort of estate planning crypto world. How do you think sort of your work differs from that of a solicitor serving the same clients with the same needs?
Well, I mean, the work that the bar gets is changing because these days we can have direct access with the public. But traditionally, and for the most part these days, the public goes to see a solicitor, and the solicitor comes to a barrister as like a consultant. And most barristers are probably advocacy consultants. They go to court. But with my practice, the solicitor will come to me when they have an issue that they find difficult. And so so the first point of contact of the client will be the solicitor. And if the client goes to see a solicitor and says, well, I've got, crypto, then if the solicitor doesn't know what that means, then the client's not going to be served properly. And there's a danger that solicitors won't be honest about it. There's also a danger that if a client phones up and says, I'm going to come and see you about my crypto, and the solicitor says, well, I can just brush up for a quarter of an hour before the appointment. And that's also dangerous. But that's a bit frivolous, and that's obviously something that people should be concerned about. But I had a case recently which was very interesting. So somebody with a substantial amount of crypto in millions wanted to make a will, and in that will he wanted to create a trust for his children. And creating a trust is fairly common for children and grandchildren with real world assets. And it's a way people have in a sense of controlling their money after they've died. So they give it to a trustee, and they say to the trustee, it's your discretion, but I'd like you to do the following. Now, using a crypto in a trust, and crypto can be held in a trust, but using crypto in a trust is difficult for various reasons. Most of all because it's so unstable. So if you put Bitcoin in a trust, the trustees are going to get very nervous holding Bitcoin because it might go down 20% tomorrow, just as much as it could go up 20% the next day. And the trustees are going to be nervous that they're going to be made responsible. So for the losses. So you need to be careful about how you create the trust. You've got to have certain terms in it that make it the trustee less fearful. But in this case, what happened was the solicitor that was very, very experienced in estate planning, but he didn't know anything about crypto. So he came to see me, and we discussed it. And so we spoke to the client together, and we said, well, we can do this. But at the end of the day, my involvement would have ended then. And when the client died, the solicitor would have been in charge of the trust. And the client was worried that because the solicitor didn't understand crypto, he didn't want to give the crypto to him to be in charge of it. Now, I'm not sure that he needed to have worried, because the solicitor is a good solicitor, and he would have got expert advice, whether from me or from an accountant or from forensic experts, crypto experts. And he would have, I think, would have done the job well. But the perception of the client is that crypto is difficult. The client has developed, he probably bought it when it was very cheap. And he didn't want to give his crypto to somebody who didn't understand it, who wasn't an enthusiast, and who wasn't going to deal with it properly. So he would have lost all its value. And so that's that's an important thing, that the perception of a crypto client is maybe different from the perception of somebody who just has lots of money in the bank or lots of shares with his broker.
Sure. I guess sort of on the topic of brokerage, and apologies for the lights. I think the energy saving in this building means that if I don't move for a few minutes, it sort of stays still. The lights go off. So yes, we've got a question about sort of how are nations regulating sort of the use and transfer of crypto assets between brokerage across borders. I don't know how much this comes up in your work, but yeah, I guess it's different to traditional property in the sense, it moves electronically, yeah. Right?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, I can remember when and it probably still happens. I remember somebody telling me about a friend of his who lived in Argentina, and he used to buy goods from China for Argentina, and the exchange control in Argentina was such that he had to get licenses to send foreign currency out of Argentina to China to pay for the goods. And that took so long and was so unreliable, he didn't know if he'd get the license, that he used to send crypto to China and he used to get the goods that way. And, he's breaking the law like that. And
Yeah, I guess maybe sort of from like maybe I guess you can be considered from sort of a tax perspective.
Well, what I was talking about before, the money laundering legislation is going to take over, I think, in most of the world now. They're getting together, they're going to get together, and the FATF is running this. And so most of the world is going to try to get as much information as possible. And because of the nature of public blockchains, where everything is transparent and you can see exactly what transactions are happening, who's sending, who's receiving, the authorities will be able to tell what's going on, and that's inevitable, I think, except in some places, maybe in China, but I think China probably knows more than most other countries internally. So there may be a couple of, I remember when there were a couple of islands in the world who created trusts. You could make a trust there that was invisible, but that was the exception rather than the rule.
Do you think sort of I think I remember was it maybe a couple of years ago, it might have been Bermuda sort of specifically introduced crypto asset specific legislation. Do you think you'll sort of see places that have traditionally been sort of used as not tax havens, but they used a lot in sort of tax planning and estate planning? Do you think there will be sort of a scramble amongst those nations to sort of be the most attractive for crypto as well as traditional assets?
Well, that's been happening over the past few years, already. So Gibraltar was an early starter, and they create a very kind of, I thought it was a good regulatory system there, and I think it's done well for them. The Bermuda, I mean, and they do it differently. So Bermuda, the way they did it was they changed the company law statutes to make it easier to create crypto companies, and that brought you within the existing regulatory system as a company. The Luxembourg's got a crypto law now. Malta has got its own law, which probably doesn't work because it's so easygoing that nobody else will accept anything that's made there. But well, that was the case. I mean, Isle of Man also had a difficult transition with crypto. So that's clear that a lot of countries are doing it some better than others to make people come to their country to create crypto businesses so that they get in on the ground floor and they have lots of business for lawyers and accountants and planners. And also lots of money coming in, lots of crypto, I suppose, coming into the country.
Going back to sort of NFTs, which I think we talked about at the start, we've got a question from Louis about sort of, it's perhaps more of a technical question. So if it's something you want to hand off, feel free. But so how are sort of these digital artworks meaningfully linked to NFTs apart from sort of just the contract and sort of the between them, between the artist and the holder of the NFT?
Yeah, there has to be a contract. I mean, so the NFT is just the ticket, and if you buy an NFT on one of the websites that sell them, they like web art galleries, and you go there and you buy one from them. So if you look at the terms and conditions of that website, that's where you'll find the contract. When Christie's sold an artwork recently for, I think it was £50 million or something, whatever it was, if you look at Christie's terms and conditions, they now have specific terms relating to NFTs. And you can see that that's all about licenses and what rights the NFT holder gets. Even if it's not written down, there will be some kind of contract. For example, if the artwork is on somebody's laptop in his home, and that's linked, and you have an NFT that's linked to that laptop electronically. If he loses his laptop or his hard disk breaks, then you've lost you've lost the artwork. All you've got is the NFT, which becomes worthless. And that's why people are finding ways to put it on decentralized file systems, so that the artwork itself, the original artwork that is linked to the NFT, so that you own that piece of that file, that electronic file, that is something that can't be lost. So the electronic link is one thing, but that's just an electronic link. You have to have a contract to show what you have, even if it's, you get the best thing where the creator says, I assign all of the copyright to you, then you own the whole thing. But that's not very common.
Sure. I guess just on a similar sort of topic. So let's say the owner of the NFT dies, and sort of they've sort of planned who they want to inherit it. How do you go about, I guess, primarily for tax purposes, right? How would you go about calculating the value of the NFT?
You have to go to a valuer. Just like any other asset.
Is there a thriving market? Is there a thriving market for these valuers now?
Well, the market is actually very robust. People are buying NFTs now, and if you put it on the market, you'll probably find the market value very quickly, unless it's rubbish. But the more common NFTs, they're selling a lot these days. The NFT art market is amazingly buoyant.
And I think sort of got a comment again sort of on the NFTs. Are these sort of traditional contracts, or are they sort of I'm cautious to use the word smart contracts. I know the ecosystem probably isn't quite there yet, but I'm assuming these are still sort of just traditional contracts.
Yeah, so they're traditional in a sense, but they have added frills. So one of the interesting things about NFTs is that if you own the NFT, if you own the copyright of the actual NFT, the actual artwork, you can have a contract with somebody, is that if they sell the NFT, then you can get a cut from that, and that comes under the smart contract. So they transfer the NFT, that triggers a percentage from the buyer to the original owner, and if that buyer sells it on, then another percentage can go to the original owner, or even to the intermediary owners. And those kind of smart contracts are being developed. There's also another thing that people are doing, is that they have an NFT, or they have a license for some kind of contract for an NFT, and they can chop that ownership up into lots of little pieces and put them into tokens that can be sold on decentralized finance protocols. And so they can be traded for other tokens, just like a crypto asset. What NFTs, what can be done with NFTs, with a lot of decentralized finance, is limited only by imagination.
So I've also got, I guess, another question about sort of, we spoke earlier about these sort of crypto, jurisdictions of taking steps to be more crypto friendly. The question is sort of, because crypto assets technically, jurisdictionless, am I right in sort of saying that it's the owner, either the sort of natural or sort of company owner, if they are domiciled, if the entity is domiciled within a jurisdiction, then only then will the rules relating to the regulation of their crypto assets apply?
So location of crypto assets is one of the big legal questions at the moment, and it's a very important one, particularly for tax. So if you're a resident in the UK, but you are domiciled, which means that you're going to go back one day to another place somewhere outside the UK, then the tax system in the UK is friendly towards you. They don't tax everything. They only tax things that you bring into the UK generally. So if you have crypto assets, it would be a good idea not to bring them into the UK, because if you sell them, you'll have to pay capital gains tax in the UK. If you sell them outside the UK, then you don't have to pay capital gains tax in the UK, only in the place where you sell them, if there is capital gains tax. The problem with that is that the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the UK have expressed the view that they will look at crypto assets as being located in the place where the beneficial owner lives. So if the beneficial owner lives in the UK, then all of his crypto assets are going to be located in the UK. And the way they've put it is that even if you have your crypto assets with an exchange, that you're using the custodial services of an exchange outside the UK, let's say in New Zealand or China, because of the way exchanges hold crypto assets for people generally, is that they will be treated as owning it for them, and even those crypto assets will be in the UK. There are different views on this, and I've advised on this. One of the different views is that it's the residence of the person who's controlling the private key. It could be the place where the private key is. So if you have a hardware wallet and you've got lots of Bitcoin on it, and you keep your hardware wallet in a safety deposit box in Switzerland, the argument is that if you don't know what the private key is of that hardware wallet, then the location is Switzerland. But, and this is going to have to be dealt with by the courts at some point, because I know that the revenue is looking for a case which is most convenient for them to bring to the courts, because lots of people are putting forward different arguments for where the location of their crypto is. I may have gone off the question.
No.
I hope not.
Yeah, no. It's been great. So I think, I guess, as a final question. So our audience is primarily students, or perhaps people with not as obviously not as much knowledge as you've got, Leigh, on the regulation of crypto assets property. Is there anywhere sort of either sort of books or sort of online resources that you can recommend, from sort of entry level to people who have maybe a better technical understanding of assets, to help them better understand what exactly the law is? And
so for technical knowledge, I find that listening to podcasts is really good. There are podcasts where people have interviews with the developers and the people running the various systems, the various protocols. And, there's so many of them today, and it's very current and up to date. And just listening to them, some of them are more complex than others. Meetups is also good. They're not as good as they used to be. They used to be friendly. Now it's people, sometimes trying to sell you a business. But for reading, I think the UK Jurisdiction Task Force legal statement is is an excellent start to getting knowledge. There are some decisions of the High Court, as I said. One of them is AA against persons unknown, where the judge talks about this, and there are a few others, and you've got to keep watching. There was one was published yesterday where somebody got an injunction for crypto assets that were stolen, and that was interesting. There are various books about it. There's a New Zealand case called Rusco against Cryptopia, which is very interesting. Firstly, because New Zealand has a very good way to look at digital assets, and secondly, because it was about an exchange that went bankrupt because they lost 31 million pounds worth of crypto, and so they went insolvent, and the judge had to examine what crypto was and how the trust worked in the exchange. So that's interesting. There are various books. The thing that you should be aware of is that this is a developing area of law. So there are a couple of things in the jurisdiction task force legal statement which I differ. I differ from their view. Some of the cases I've read, there are some things that I don't agree with. I may be wrong, they may be wrong, but you need to look at these things questioningly. The Law Commission has just come out with its consultations. That's an interesting thing to read. There's lots to read. There's the FATF and the EU money laundering stuff. The Revenue has brought out a crypto assets manual where they discuss how they will deal with crypto tax-wise.
That's great. Well, thanks for sort of your time this evening, Leigh, and I'm sure sort of if anyone's missed any part of this session, there's going to be a recording going live on the SCL website. I imagine sort of over the next few weeks. As a reminder, membership of the SCL is free for any students in full-time education, as well as free for sort of 2 years when you're a trainee or at the year that you're a pupil barrister. We're also on another SCL Student Bytes is looking for junior editors to join the team. So if anyone's interested, sort of go to our website and sort of just follow the links. Yeah, so that's the end of the session. Thank you again, Leigh, and I'll sort of leave everyone to get on with their evenings.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.